If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we continue to unravel the mysteries behind the origins, motives, and cultures of the 16 ghostly guilds in the world of darkness. This episode will focus on the Chanteurs Guild and their Keening Arcanos. This has been a very interesting session, and things aren't looking very well for Doris though, aren't they? Taking huge unexpected turns, the tragic nature of Vampire the Masquerade, the betrayal and the potential loss of humanity.
Oh, good heavens! Oh, you can't sneak up on me like that, dear explorer. I may be a well-hearted individual who has seen many a ghost in his time, but you needn't try and test that. Good grief! You gave me quite the fright. I was lost in this podcast. Blame with thyself, and it is quite entertaining. This host also runs a Law by Night Productions podcast too, which some relatives pointed out might be something you may want to listen to at some point. If anything, the music for both of these are quite stellar. Music is quite the powerful tool, isn't it? It could soothe a wailing infant, inspire an army into battle, and reduce even the hardiest individual to tears. Music composers know this, which of course carries over to those poor, departed souls that inhabit the Shadowlands. I am of course referring to those that adorn the title of Chanteur, be it someone who is well versed in the Arcanos of Keening or belonging to the guild of the same name. As per our previous discussions, I believe it is best to go through what exactly Keening is, which will help us understand and appreciate the little that we know about the Chanteurs Guild. Keening is the Arcanos of emotion to their listeners, whether it's one of the undead or living across the shroud. This is usually transmitted through sound. This is stereotypically done through song, but can be done through some sort of instrument, be it a relic or something crafted in the underworld. To an extent, the ghostly screams of banshees would be a particular morbid example of Keening in work. We did one example of someone conveying Keening through laughter, but it is most common for the Arcanos to be delivered via song, for that is how it is usually taught. That said, it is possible to use it in other ways, such as dance or poetry, but touch is required to make it work. It is not true emotion, but something more artificial, possibly blander. This can be used as a source of emotion to feed one's pathos, but it is a very difficult way of doing so, as you can imagine. One has to be quite the practiced individual to pull this off. Older members of the Chanteurs Guild can be quite reluctant in sharing this information, as it can dissuade younger and newer members of the guild to seek emotion for themselves. That said, many come to the guild too eager to seek lost emotion, so to take that however you wish. With all the Arcanoses in the underworld, there is an element of risk involved, something to go wrong. For Chanteurs, this is usually an emotional feedback for some description, which can feed the shadow with angst or affect with the Chanteur circle. Some Chanteurs have gone mad from their failed Keening practices. Other than the occasional musical instrument, be it a relic or some sort of necklace depicting one, the other way of identifying a Chanteur is not what you could see, but rather what you can hear. This is not surprising, given the very musical nature of the guild. It is said that you can hear the tunes that mean the most to the Chanteur play ever so softly if you stand close enough and listen, almost like they have their own personal soundtrack. From our understanding, it can never go away, which you can imagine being quite a pain for the Chanteur at times. As for the guild themselves, we don't know for certain when exactly they formed, but we are aware that they were probably one of the last of the guilds to group together under the banner of guild. They have always catered towards individualism. Their shared love for music has always been the primary motivation, taking full advantage of popular entertainers for the highest echelons of underworld society. They became arrogant with it, claiming their artistic merits exceeded that of the maskers and anyone else. They, like many of the guilds, were enthusiastic to join the revolt, but were also one of the ones that suffered the heaviest losses that took the longest to recover from. Just before the revolt, however, the influence of the Chanteurs Guild was beginning to wane. Groups of powerful Chanteurs such as Dalison, Bright, and Homer, names you probably recognize from your own studies, decided to form the guild proper. Originally dubbed the Council of Poets, proposed to use logic, persuasion, and sometimes bribery to win many of their cause. Many refused to give up their independence. Groups within the guild known as Nightingales, some of which would actively work against the council and disrupt their plans, becoming an organization of themselves. Our research states that this would be the Nightingales' undoing. The council challenged the Nightingales to a musical competition, which the Nightingales had challenged they thought they would win easily. They didn't, but some would suggest this was a rigged result. What is certain is that as many Nightingales joined the council, the revolt was underway. Whilst many didn't fight on the front lines, they fought mainly in the courts of the Anacreons and homes of the wealthy, using their blades of influence to cut down foes with slashes of misdirection and anti-rebel efforts. It is also known that there were plenty of spies amongst their numbers too. It is highly likely that their current title, the Chanteurs, came about after the fall, almost like a romantic rebranding. Chanteur is a French term for a male vocalist or singer. Chanteuresse is the term for a female singer. It would appear that members of the guild exclusively go by Chanteur regardless of gender or lack of thereof. Despite this, the guild is very much just a collection of factions, often factions composed of a single circle, usually known as bards, troops, orchestras, or the like. The guild has authority in matters of interest to all Chanteurs, and arbitraries disputes amongst its members, but only in an event of major significance gets the Chanteurs to work together in true guild fashion. Some factions in a formal sense do exist within the guild. Well, a formal sense is defined by the Chanteurs. It's not uncommon for a Chanteur to cycle through several factions over the course of their own life as their philosophy of music and existence changes. The troubadours are eager for information, some of which they pass on through song and story, some of which they keep for themselves. The outcasts' music emphasize rebellion, discontent, and anger at the system. There are also the romantics, who believe music can lead to love, tranquility, and ultimately transcendence. The Haydn Symphony seek to create elaborate musical performances, often using bizarre instruments, and often serve as leaders of the guild. The hardcores wield music as a weapon against oblivion and its creatures. The jesters, or comedians, work keening through humor rather than music, and the sanguine corners are a network of Chanteur spies. As for the more modern times, many within the guild view themselves still as the finest artisans of the wraiths, a view that has made them enemies of the maskers and artificers. They are welcome in many places in Waverley High Society, bearing gifts, haunts, and sacks of oboli to back up those arrogant viewpoints. It is not hard to see them as shallow, only interested in the next performance and not anything else truly of serious nature. However, what isn't all that well known is the equally egotistical guildmaster I should say, Mikolos, is somewhat of a traitor. While his guild unknowingly distracts the hierarchy and Death Lords, Mikolos has been secretly making deals with Yu Huan, the ruler of the Dark Kingdom of Jade, feeding them information for a planned invasion of the major western necropoli and Stygia, and helping pull down the infrastructure of other guilds. Although it would appear he is doing it for the benefit of his guild, as they would have untold wealth to become the most favoured of wraiths anywhere, he has more selfish motivations. He would be awarded by Yu Huan being made the head artisan of the underworld. Now, if Mikolos' treachery was brought to light, the guild would definitely be disbanded. The few Chanteur guild members that would have survived would become little more than wandering minstrels for the little time that Wraithly Society continued to exist, but where there is story to be told, there is song to be sung, and who knows when the good people of Stygia need someone to fan the heroic fires that drive them to action. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, and you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.